Wow. Just wow. I would just like to take the first few moments of this non-spoiler review just to say that yes, I know that this channel is the tiniest speck on the grand platform that is YouTube, let alone the internet as a whole. But even if there is a 1% chance that Zack and Deborah Snyder hear this, I need to take it as an absolute certainty and just say thank you. Today I woke up at 6:30 in the morning, went downstairs and spent 4 blissful hours watching this film with my parents, who also loved it. So much payoff made from the promises made in the trailers 4 years ago, and of course a beautiful, tear-jerking dedication to Autumn Snyder at the end, accompanied by her favourite song, Hallelujah. This movie is incredible in every way conceivable, and this, what I just saw, should have been the film that everyone saw in 2017. But it wasn't. And despite that, here it is now, 4 years after, and that isn't just because of the pandemic and HBO Max desperately needing new content. It was because of all of the fans who rallied together and made this whole thing possible. Now, I will be the first person to admit that I was not a part of the Release the Snyder Cut movement. In fact, I was largely against it. Not because I didn't want to see the artist tell his story, but because for as many amazing fans out there who pushed for this film in peace, it felt like there were twice as many toxic people who pushed for this film and used their passion in ways that didn't correspond to what the movement stood for. But, as I said, it's here now, and I couldn't be gladder. You can go back to an old podcast episode from before this movie was even announced and hear me ask and hope to be proven wrong that this thing didn't exist, or even if it did, wasn't even near completion. Because above everything else, I am a comic book geek, which means I love all things super. Marvel, DC, comics, movies, TV shows, video games, I love it all. And as a DC fan, I fell in love with this film. No, poetry, from the start until the very end of the credits. When I look back on the 2017 Justice League cut and compare it to this, I feel nothing but disappointment and empathy for my 14-year-old self, who came into that film with the promise of the one I just saw today. Back then, characters were mistreated and underutilized, the score was a mismatched, jumbled mess, much like the film itself. No disrespect to the legend Danny Elfman, of course. And the only thing more underwhelming than the way the plot was handled is the CGI that made us believe that a man most definitely cannot fly. This film, on the other hand, with the obvious help from its 4-hour runtime, handles each character with care and makes sure that they all have an arc and a purpose. The score is handled wonderfully by Junkie XL, and not only gives each character their own leitmotif, but their own style of music as well. The CGI is near flawless, and certainly trumps the goofy looking characters and settings of the theatrical release. And the character-driven plot takes its time to explore so much more, and unfolds into a wonderful journey from a dark and largely flawed world to a new age of heroes that was said to never come again. Snyder's overall plan and arc for these characters and the narrative in the original DCEU timeline is nothing short of epic, both in nature and in scope. Now, it's no secret that this film ends on a cliffhanger. Now, I won't divulge what it is, because we'd be getting into spoiler territory, but it sets up what surely would have been another character-driven spectacle of a sequel. If I'm being honest, I wouldn't be surprised if WB releases this movie for a limited run in cinemas across the world after the pandemic has eventually died off. And they would be fools not to greenlight a sequel that would allow Snyder to tell his full story alongside and separate from the ever-growing main timeline of the DCEU. It's hard to express how much I love this film without going into full details and spoiler territory, so do yourself a favour and watch this film. If you don't have any means of watching it digitally, there will be a physical release in May, so make sure to pick that up, because I know that I can't wait to watch this bad boy in 4K. Will and I will both be diving into this film a lot more in depth in a spoiler cast when he's eventually watched the film. But finally, I know I wasn't a part of the Release the Snyder Cut movement, but together, we can restore the Snyderverse. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw here today, then maybe consider subscribing to catch our other content as and when it releases.